Creating comfort for capital providers. Sometimes when seeking capital, it's understandable that the natural inclination would be to paint the prettiest picture possible, to paint the home run scenario, the if everything goes perfectly right, this is just how good it could become. However, what we want to highlight in this video, sometimes the focus should really be more so on what is the down the strike zone, down the fairway scenario, and what are some of the key attributes that provide comfort. Key item in today's video is the concept of loss aversion. So I think it's an old Buffett quote that said, rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. And that is vitally important. So anytime there's a capital conversation, we always try to emphasize that it's the preservation of capital and an adequate return on that capital that is the fundamental objective of deploying the capital. And then if all these wonderful things happen beyond that, great. But paint the picture of the meat and potatoes of the core of the bell curve, then you can talk about some of the wonderful extra things that could happen along the way. And so when seeking capital and when trying to make that compelling argument towards acquiring or attaining that capital, 5 things to keep in mind to provide that level of comfort to a capital provider. So the first of these is going to be a sales process. What we mean by this is there a definable, consistent, reliable, durable method by which sales to the business come? And that can simply be, we make X phone calls, we send out X postcards, we spend this on marketing, this is what we do for outbound, this is what we do for media, this is what we do for advertising, this is what comes in through referrals or word of mouth. But is there a defined process by which there are iterations of inputs that yield certain outputs? We do X, Y, meetings, calls, proposals take place, Z clients come through at the end of the day. If there's that provides a lot of comfort. Takes all of the randomness out of things, takes a lot of the guesswork out of things, and you can say, okay, that is how more apples fall off the tree. The more easily defined, the more clearly defined, the more comfort. Second is the fulfillment process and people. Similar to how we don't want randomness with how sales happen, we don't want randomness with how the product, service, or offering is ultimately fulfilled, executed, done, provided. How do the services take place? If it's a company that provides software, then when someone wants to buy the software, how do they buy it? How is it implemented? How is it maintained? If someone wants a service, how do they sign up? How is it scheduled? How is the service provided? How is it followed up? What is the ongoing schedule? If it's a product, if someone wants the candy bar, how are they manufactured? How are they distributed? How are they put in the store? How are they bought? What happens after someone buys it and enjoys it? And how do you make sure you keep them enjoying into the future? But all of these things are, can you define the path, right? The customer journey, if you will, is one way of characterizing it. But if someone wants to A, buy something, so they reach the end of the sales funnel and they say, okay, I would like to purchase, do, proceed. How does that go from that to services, products, offering, provided, happy customer who wants to tell all of their friends and repeat the exercise? Well, that's another key element that if you can define correctly will provide a meaningful amount of comfort to a capital provider. Third element is a history of prudent capital allocation. What do we mean by this? Being smart with your money. If you can point to a long history of being smart with money, then it is going to provide comfort to a capital provider that you'll continue to do so. There's another Buffettism that when good management meets a bad company, it's typically the company that keeps its reputation. And oftentimes the same thing can be said with capital. A company with a bad history of allocating and utilizing capital and the returns they receive from that capital, new money doesn't necessarily change bad habits. And so conversely, and to a good extent, if there's a history of showing that capital has been allocated intelligently, that more money coming into the system should see similar results, right? And so always the disclaimer of history is no certainty as to the future. It is certainly a very strong indicator. So building off this, number 4 are specific plans for the future. And so if you have a history of allocating capital intelligently, great, but what is the specific plan for the future? We've had other videos where we've delved into that, even into more granularity. Generally speaking, what are the objectives? What are the priorities of the objectives? What are the timelines of the objectives? What is the capital necessary for the objectives? And what is the expected return for that deployment of capital? What is it expected to yield? You put $1 in, what's going to come out? When should it come out? And in what order and magnitude? But that's the idea. The more specific you can have a plan, the more someone's going to feel confident. And it again eliminates randomness, eliminates guesswork. And number 5, downside protection. Now, we don't want to harp on the negative, harp on every single thing that can go wrong. However, it is a good idea to be able to characterize what the downside protection of a scenario is. For instance, if it's a software company and we say, here's the objectives, here's the plans. However, even if we just stay where we are, we can service the debt. Even if our rate of customer acquisition does not improve by the extent we think it will, but perhaps 50% of that, a quarter of that, if the result is still good, then great. Right? If the only time someone can reach a good outcome is if everything goes right, it's only going to happen in a small percentage of the situations. However, you want a situation that in 98% of the outcomes, it is still a good situation, right? Give me a high probability of good with a chance of excellent, and that's a nice investment. And that's a nice situation to deploy capital into, and that provides a lot of comfort. And to recap, 5 key items that provide comfort to capital providers, whether debt or equity. 1, a well-defined sales process. 2, an equally well-defined fulfillment process, inclusive of the people involved. 3, a history of intelligent capital allocation. 4, specific plans for the future. 5, a tangible downside protection. So I will conclude that none of these included knocking the casing off the ball. None of these included everything absolutely going right. And none of these included winning the lottery. And that's the important part. We want, again, an extremely high probability of a good outcome with a meaningful probability of an elite level outcome. That's the asymmetric risk profile, if you will, limited downside with a meaningful upside that people are interested in. Remember, if someone wants a 48% chance of doubling their money, they can just put it on black or red in a roulette wheel. And that's why investing versus speculation is a meaningfully different thing. Asymmetric risk. Keep that in mind. An outcome that is very likely to be very good, somewhat likely to be elite, very unlikely to be bad. And these are 5 elements that can help create that level of comfort. So that's the thought for today. Hope the week continues to go well. God bless, keep pushing forward, and we'll see everyone next time.